The night I left, the moon was the only witness. I didn't pack much. Just my uniform, a toothbrush, and the $28 Stan hadn't found yet. My hands shook as I stuffed them into the duffel bag, my breath coming in short, silent gasps. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like his footsteps. Every shadow felt like his fist. I left barefoot. The pavement bit into my soles, cold and unforgiving. But I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Behind me, the apartment, that prison, stood dark and silent. Ahead, the bus station glowed like a lighthouse. 3 days later, I was 100 miles away, holed up in a motel room with flickering lights and locks that didn't quite catch. I checked them anyway, over and over. My ribs still ached where his boot had landed during our last argument. Just temporary, I whispered to the water-stained ceiling. The motel room, temporary. The way I flinched when someone in the hall raised their voice, temporary. The trembling hands that couldn't hold a coffee cup steady, temporary. The nightmares where I woke up tasting blood, temporary. At least, that's what I told myself. Subscribe now to follow Marjorie's complete journey from victim to something else entirely. Also comment where you are watching from. I stood before the cracked bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. My hair was darker now, box dye from the drugstore, a muddy brown that made my skin look sallow. The bruise on my left cheekbone had faded to a sickly yellow-green. My clothes hung loose on a frame that had forgotten how to eat properly. Stan had always liked me curvy. Said it gave him something to hold on to. I tugged the neckline of my shirt higher, covering the finger-shaped bruises on my collarbone. My hands trembled as I traced them, his last gift before I'd finally found the courage to leave. My phone buzzed on the chipped porcelain sink, and my heart seized. He can't find you, I reminded myself. New number. New city. Even my social media was deleted. Stan didn't know where I was. But the text wasn't from him. It was from the only person in this city who knew I existed, Carmen, a waitress I'd met at the diner 3 days ago when my $28 had dwindled to $15, and I was desperate enough to ask for day-old pastries. Still need work? Bellissimo is hiring. Tell them I sent you. Address below. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Bellissimo. I'd seen it once during one of my aimless walks through the city, a warm golden glow on a street corner, the kind of place that smelled like roasted garlic and sounded like clinking wine glasses and soft laughter. The kind of place I used to dream about working at, back when I had dreams. I didn't have much choice. My $15 wouldn't last another week, and the motel manager had already started looking at me like I was trouble waiting to happen. I pulled on my only clean shirt, a white button-down I'd stolen from Stan's closet, and the black slacks I'd worn to my last real job, 3 years and a lifetime ago. My reflection looked almost normal. Almost like someone who belonged in a restaurant with linen tablecloths instead of someone who'd fled in the night with bleeding feet. The walk to Bellissimo took 20 minutes. I kept my head down, avoiding eye contact, my shoulders hunched against the evening chill. The streets here were different from Stan's neighborhood, older, quieter, lined with brick buildings that leaned together like gossiping neighbors. And then I saw it. Bellissimo rose before me like something from a dream I'd forgotten how to have. Warm light spilled from its tall windows onto the rain-slick sidewalk. The scent of garlic, butter, and something sweet, caramelized onions maybe, drifted into the street. Through the glass, I could see crisp white tablecloths, glinting silverware, couples leaning close in candlelight. I almost kept walking, almost convinced myself I wasn't good enough for a place like this, that they'd take one look at my secondhand clothes and haunted eyes and send me away. But my stomach was empty, and my hands were still shaking, and I didn't have anywhere else to go. The hostess stand was just inside the door, positioned beneath a crystal chandelier that cast prisms across the marble floor. A woman stood behind it, elegant mid-40s, with silver threaded through her dark hair and the kind of posture that spoke of ballet lessons and finishing schools. She looked up as I entered, and I watched her eyes take me in. The box dye hair, the too loose clothes, the way I couldn't quite meet her gaze. "Can I help you?" Her voice was softer than I expected. Not cold, not dismissive. almost gentle. My voice cracked. I swallowed hard. Carmen said you might be hiring? Something shifted in her expression. Recognition, maybe. Or sympathy. You're a friend of Carmen's? I nodded, not trusting my voice. She studied me for another moment, then reached beneath the stand and pulled out a clipboard with an application attached. Fill this out. Have a seat at the bar. Go ahead, that one in the corner. I'll bring you some bread while you work. The unexpected kindness made my throat tight. I took the clipboard with trembling hands and found my way to the corner bar stool she'd indicated. True to her word, she appeared a moment later with a basket of warm bread and a small dish of olive oil. Take your time, she said quietly. Then, even more quietly, you're safe here. I didn't know how she knew I needed to hear that, but the words settled into my chest like a stone, heavy and anchoring. I was halfway through the application when I felt it, that prickling sensation at the back of my neck that meant someone was watching. I'd learned to recognize it living with Stan, had honed it into a survival instinct. I looked up slowly, my pen hovering over the page. The restaurant had a second level, a balcony that overlooked the main dining room. And there, barely visible in the shadows, stood a man. Even from a distance, even in the dim light, I could tell he was different from everyone else in the room. The way he stood, utterly still, hands in the pockets of what looked like an expensive suit, spoke of a kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself. The staff moved around him like water around a stone. A waiter passed by and gave a subtle nod. A busboy straightened his posture without even looking up. And he was looking at me, not the casual glance of someone people watching. Something more intent, more knowing, like he could see past my box-dye hair and borrowed clothes to all the broken pieces underneath. Our eyes met across the distance, and my breath caught. His gaze didn't waver, didn't soften. He simply watched me with the patience of a man who is used to being waited for, used to being obeyed. Then he turned and disappeared into the shadows of the upper level, leaving me with a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I looked back down at my application, but my hand was shaking too hard to write. You're safe here, the hostess had said. But as I sat there, feeling the ghost of that stranger's gaze on my skin, I wasn't so sure. The hostess, her name was Elena, I learned, called me 3 hours later with a start date. Monday evening, 5 o'clock sharp for training. Wear black slacks and a white shirt. Comfortable shoes. And don't be late. I wasn't. I arrived 15 minutes early, my hair pulled back in a neat bun, my hands scrubbed raw from nervous washing. The restaurant looked different in daylight, still elegant, but less dreamlike. More real. Staff moved through the dining room with choreographed precision, setting tables, polishing glasses, moving like dancers who'd performed the same routine 1,000 times. Carmen found me hovering near the hostess stand, trying not to look as terrified as I felt. You made it. She smiled, and I recognized the relief in it. She'd vouched for me, put her own reputation on the line for a stranger she'd met in a diner. Come on, I'll show you the ropes. The first thing she taught me was how to carry a tray. The second was how to read a table, who was ready to order, who wanted to be left alone, who would complain no matter what you did. The third was the unspoken rules. Always be polite, even when they're not, she said, demonstrating how to balance 3 plates along one arm. Never linger near the VIP room upstairs. If you're sent up there, you deliver and leave. Don't make small talk. Don't ask questions. What's the VIP room for? Carmen's smile thinned. See? That's exactly what I mean. Don't ask questions. I didn't. The rest of the rules came in fragments throughout the week. Don't interrupt Luca when he's on the phone. Don't refill the wine glasses at table 7 without asking first. Mr. Chun is particular about his pours. Don't ever be late. And don't talk about Mr. Marino. His name came up in whispers, in carefully neutral tones that somehow made it sound louder than if they'd shouted it. The line cooks fell silent when someone mentioned he'd be in that evening. Elena straightened the menus that were already perfectly straight whenever his car pulled up outside. Even Carmen, who seemed unshakable, got a tightness around her eyes when she said his name. He owns Bellissimo. I asked on my third day, during our break in the narrow staff room that smelled like coffee and bleach. Among other things. Carmen didn't look up from her phone. Just be professional. Do your job. He notices everything, but if you're good at what you do, you'll be fine. He notices everything. The words settled into my stomach like a stone. I didn't see him again for 5 days. Luca, the restaurant manager, was the one who terrified me in the meantime. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. When he walked through the dining room, the air seemed to tighten. Conversations became quieter. Movements became more precise. He watched me constantly those first few days. Not obviously, but I felt his gaze tracking me as I learned to navigate the space between tables without bumping chairs, as I memorized the wine list, as I practiced the delicate art of being present but invisible. On Thursday, he pulled me aside after the dinner rush. "You're doing well," he said, his accent slight but noticeable, Italian maybe, or somewhere close. "Quick learner. Good instincts." "Thank you." I kept my eyes down, the way I'd learned to do with Stan when he was deciding whether to be pleased or angry. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you." My head snapped up, but his expression wasn't angry, just assessing. "Here, you don't need to make yourself small," he said quietly. "You do your job well. You hold your head up." "Understood." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Something flickered across his face. Sympathy, maybe, or recognition. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual professional mask. "Good. Tomorrow you'll start serving upstairs when needed. Elena will brief you on protocols." He walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing in the hallway with my heart racing and my hands trembling. "You don't need to make yourself small." I'd been making myself small for so long, I wasn't sure I remembered how to be any other way. Friday evening, the restaurant hummed with a different energy. The tables were all reserved, the kitchen staff moving with military efficiency, the air thick with expensive perfume and the scent of seared meat and fresh herbs. I was clearing table 12, a couple who'd barely spoken to each other through 4 courses, when the room shifted. It wasn't loud.
No announcement, no dramatic entrance.
Just a subtle change in pressure, like the air before a storm. I looked up and saw him. Brent Marino moved through the dining room like he owned it, which I supposed he did. But it was more than that. He moved like a man who'd never questioned his right to any space he occupied. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to broad shoulders and a lean frame. His dark hair was swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and shadows, devastatingly handsome in a way that felt more like a warning than an invitation. The room didn't fall silent. That would have been too obvious. But conversation softened. Laughter became more controlled. Even the clink of silverware seemed muted. He spoke briefly to Luca near the bar, his voice too low for me to hear. Then his gaze swept the room, a predator checking his territory, and landed on me. I froze, dirty plates balanced on my tray, suddenly hyper-aware of the strand of hair that had escaped my bun, the small wine stain on my apron. He didn't look away. Didn't smile, just watched me with those unnervingly blue eyes, his expression unreadable but intent. Like he was seeing something in me that even I couldn't see. Like he was remembering something. My breath caught. The tray wobbled slightly, and I steadied it with shaking hands. He was walking toward me. Every instinct I'd honed over 3 years with Stan screamed at me to run, to hide, to make myself invisible. But my feet wouldn't move. I stood there, rooted to the spot, as Brent Marino closed the distance between us with the unhurried confidence of a man who knew he'd never be refused. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle, sandalwood, and something darker. Close enough that when he tilted his head slightly, studying me, I could see the exact moment his gaze found the bruise. I'd covered it carefully that morning, concealer, powder, even a touch of foundation I'd bought with my first paycheck. But the lighting in Bellissimo was designed to be flattering, to cast everything in a warm golden glow that somehow revealed rather than concealed. His eyes narrowed fractionally. The temperature around us seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What's your name?" His voice was quiet, but it cut through the ambient noise like a blade. Marjorie. It came out steadier than I felt. Marjorie Hayes. He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd already known. Then he leaned in, not close enough to be improper, but close enough that I caught the heat radiating from his body, close enough that his next words were meant only for me. Make sure no one ever leaves another mark on you. It wasn't a question, wasn't comfort or sympathy. It was a command, delivered with the absolute certainty of a man who expected to be obeyed. My lips parted, but no sound came out. I stood there, frozen, as he straightened and walked past me toward the private stairs that led to the VIP room. He didn't look back. I stood in the middle of the dining room, my tray of dirty dishes growing heavy in my hands, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Carmen appeared at my elbow. Marjorie? You okay? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. But I wasn't okay, because Brent Marino had looked at me, really looked at me, and seen exactly what I'd been trying to hide. And somehow, that terrified me more than anything Stan had ever done. The first envelope appeared on a Tuesday. I was clearing table 9, a group of 4 men in expensive suits who'd ordered the most costly items on the menu without looking at the prices, when the oldest one, silver-haired and heavy-jowled, pulled a cream-colored envelope from his jacket and placed it on the table. Not near his plate, not tucked under his wine glass. Directly in the center of the table, like an offering. Luca materialized from nowhere, his movements smooth and practiced. He picked up the envelope without a word, slipped it into his breast pocket, and gave the man a small nod. The transaction took less than 5 seconds. I pretended not to notice, focusing on stacking plates with a careful precision Carmen had taught me. But my hands trembled slightly, and I felt Luca's eyes on me as I walked away. You didn't see that, Carmen said later, her voice low as we refilled salt shakers in the narrow hallway between the kitchen and dining room. I didn't see what? She gave me a look that was equal parts approval and warning. Good. Keep it that way. But I couldn't unsee it. And once I knew what to look for, I saw it everywhere. Table 14, Thursday evening. A woman in diamonds and fur who paid with an envelope thick enough to contain far more than a meal's worth of cash. Table 6 on Friday. 2 men who spoke in Italian and left an envelope with Luca before their appetizers even arrived. Table 21, 23, 17. Envelopes. Always envelopes. And the conversations that stopped the moment I approached. Not abruptly, these people were too smooth for that. But I'd catch the tail end of sentences that made no sense for a restaurant. The shipment arrives Thursday. He's expanding into the North Territory. After what happened in Baltimore, we can't afford. Silence. Smiles. Could we have more bread, please? I brought bread.
Poured wine.
Cleared plates. Kept my head down, and my expression neutral. But I was listening. Always listening. It was Carmen who finally told me the truth, or at least part of it. We were in the staff room, 3 weeks into my employment. She was counting her tips while I nursed a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The late shift had ended, and the restaurant was quiet except for the distant sound of the cleaning crew. You've been good about not asking questions, she said without looking up from her stack of bills. You told me not to. I did. She finished counting and tucked the money into her purse. But you're wondering anyway. I can tell. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, weighing my words. It's not a normal restaurant, is it? Carmen laughed, a short, sharp sound without much humor.
No.
It's not. She leaned back in her chair, studying me with those dark, knowing eyes. Bellissimo isn't just a restaurant, Marjorie. It's his kingdom, Mr. Marino's. And we're all just subjects. What does that mean? It means you do your job, you take your paycheck, and you don't ask what happens upstairs in that VIP room. It means when men in $1,000 suits pay in envelopes instead of credit cards, you don't wonder why. It means, she paused, choosing her words carefully. It means you're safer here than you'd be anywhere else in the city, as long as you remember whose protection you're under. The word protection sent a chill down my spine. It was the same word Stan had used. I'm protecting you. I'm keeping you safe. You need me. Carmen must have seen something in my face, because her expression softened. It's not what you're thinking. Mr. Marino isn't. He doesn't hurt people who work for him. But he notices everything. Controls everything. Just be smart. Be loyal. And whatever you see, whatever you hear, keep it to yourself. I nodded slowly. What if I want to leave? Then you leave. He's not going to stop you. She stood, slinging her purse over her shoulder. But I don't think you want to. Not yet. Not when you're still looking over your shoulder every time someone raises their voice. She was gone before I could respond, leaving me alone in the flickering fluorescent light with my cold coffee and a truth I didn't want to acknowledge. She was right. I didn't want to leave. Because for the first time in 3 years, I felt safe. Even if that safety came with invisible strings attached. The summons came on a Saturday night. Luca found me during the dinner rush, his expression unreadable. Mr. Marino has guests upstairs. They've requested service. You'll take it. My stomach dropped. Me? I've never. Carmen usually. Carmen is busy. You'll do fine. He was already walking away. The wine is already selected. Just bring it up, pour, and leave. Don't speak unless spoken to. And Marjorie. He paused at the kitchen door. Don't linger. The bottle was waiting at the bar, a red with a label I couldn't pronounce and a price tag that made my eyes water. Elena handed it to me with a corkscrew and what looked like sympathy. Second floor. Last door on the right. Knock twice, wait for permission, then enter. My hands shook as I carried the bottle up the narrow back staircase. The second floor was quieter, dimmer, the walls covered in dark wood paneling that absorbed sound. Thick carpet muffled my footsteps. The air smelled different up here, leather and cigar smoke and something else. Power, maybe. The last door on the right was solid mahogany with a brass handle. I balanced the bottle in one hand and knocked twice.
Come.
One word. His voice. Lower than I remembered, but unmistakable. I pushed open the door. The private room was smaller than I'd imagined, but more opulent. Dark wood, burgundy leather, a table that could seat 8 but currently held only 4 men. The lighting was low, golden, casting shadows that made it hard to read faces. Brent sat at the head of the table, his suit jacket draped over the chair behind him, his white shirt crisp despite the late hour. The other 3 men were older, harder, the kind of men whose eyes tracked you like predators assessing prey. The conversation stopped the moment I entered. Gentlemen, Brent said smoothly, our wine. I moved forward on autopilot, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run. But I'd learned to ignore that instinct. Learned to function through fear. I uncorked the bottle, steady hands, thank God, and moved around the table, pouring for each man in turn. The silence was suffocating. I could feel them watching me, assessing me, wondering who I was and why I was here. As I was saying, one of the men resumed, his voice rough with cigarettes and age. The shipment arrives Thursday. My people will handle distribution in the North Territory, but we'll need clearance for. He cut himself off as I approached his glass. I poured without meeting his eyes, without acknowledging that I'd heard anything at all. She's new. It wasn't a question. The man's eyes raked over me with undisguised interest. Pretty little thing. Where'd you find her? She's an employee. Brent's voice held a note of warning. Nothing more. I finished pouring and stepped back, ready to flee. That's when I saw it. The mirror on the far wall, ornately framed, reflecting the entire room. And in that reflection, Brent's eyes found mine. He didn't look surprised. Didn't look concerned that I'd overheard talk of shipments and territories. He just watched me with that same unreadable expression, like he'd expected this exact moment. Like he'd arranged it. My breath caught. Our eyes held in the reflection for 3 seconds that felt like hours. Then I turned and walked toward the door, keeping my pace steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system.
Luca.
Brent's voice stopped me with my hand on the doorknob. I turned. He was looking at Luca, who I hadn't even noticed standing in the shadows near the bar cart. She'll continue serving upstairs when needed. Brent swirled the wine in his glass, still not looking at me. She's trustworthy. The word hung in the air like a brand, like a claim.
Luca nodded.
Of course, Mr. Marino. You're dismissed, Marjorie. I left, closed the door behind me, made it halfway down the stairs before my legs started shaking so badly I had to grip the railing. She's trustworthy. He'd just made me complicit. Pulled me into whatever dark business he conducted in that room. Not by threatening me or forcing me, but by simply deciding I was already part of it. And the worst part, the part that terrified me most, I hadn't said no, hadn't protested, hadn't even considered walking away. Because Brent Marino had called me trustworthy, and some broken, desperate part of me had wanted so badly to believe him that I'd let him wrap that word around me like a collar. Carmen's words echoed in my head as I descended the rest of the stairs. Bellissimo isn't just a restaurant. It's his kingdom. And I'd just been granted citizenship, whether I wanted it or not. The cab was late. I stood beneath the flickering streetlight outside Bellissimo's service entrance, my feet aching in shoes that weren't as comfortable as Elena had promised, my apron stuffed into my bag alongside $200 in tips, the most I'd made in a single night. The restaurant was dark behind me, locked and silent. Carmen had left an hour ago. Even Luca had gone home, though not before reminding me to lock the staff door behind me. Be careful out here, he'd said, his eyes lingering on my face in a way that felt more protective than threatening. Not all neighborhoods are safe at this hour. I checked my phone for the third time. The cab company had confirmed my ride 20 minutes ago. Where the hell was it? A match flared in the darkness to my left. I spun, my heart leaping into my throat, my hand instinctively reaching for the pepper spray I'd started carrying in my purse. Brent Marino stepped into the light, cigarette between his lips, the flame from his lighter casting shadows across the sharp planes of his face. He wore the same clothes from earlier, charcoal slacks, white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, no tie. He looked relaxed in a way I'd never seen him inside the restaurant. Almost human. Almost. Late for a cab. He shook out the match and took a long drag, smoke curling from his lips into the cold night air. They said 15 minutes. My voice came out steadier than I felt. That was 25 minutes ago. Cancel it. I'll have someone drive you home. It wasn't a question. Wasn't really an offer either. Just a statement of fact, delivered with the casual authority of a man who'd never been refused. That's not necessary. I've fine. Marjorie. The way he said my name, soft, almost gentle, somehow made it feel more like a command than if he'd shouted it. It's 2 a.m. You're standing alone on a street corner in a neighborhood you barely know. Cancel the cab. I should have argued. Should have insisted on my independence, my ability to take care of myself. But exhaustion and fear and something else, something I didn't want to examine too closely, made me pull out my phone and cancel the ride. He nodded, satisfied, and pulled out his own phone.
Type something quick.
5 minutes. We stood in silence, the only sound the distant hum of traffic and the occasional hiss of a cigarette. I kept my eyes on the empty street, hyper-aware of his presence beside me, the heat radiating from his body, the scent of smoke and sandalwood, the way he occupied space like he owned it. You did well tonight. His voice broke the silence. Upstairs. I just poured wine. You kept your mouth shut. In my world, that's more valuable than any skill. He took another drag, exhaled slowly. Most people can't help themselves. They hear something they shouldn't, and it burns in them until they have to tell someone.
Talk to a friend.
Post something vague online. Drop hints to prove they know more than they should. I didn't respond. Didn't trust myself to. But not you. He turned to look at me, his blue eyes catching the streetlight and holding it. You're smart enough to know that some knowledge is a burden, not a gift. My throat felt tight. I'm just trying to keep my job. You're trying to stay invisible. His gaze moved to the bruise under my ear, completely faded now, but somehow he still saw it. You think if you're quiet enough, small enough, you'll be safe. The accuracy of it stole my breath. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the mild night. Stan won't find you. My blood turned to ice. Every muscle in my body locked. The street tilted beneath my feet. He won't come near this city again. Brent flicked ash from his cigarette, his tone conversational, like he'd just commented on the weather. You don't need to look over your shoulder anymore. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he'd just said.
Stan.
I'd never mentioned Stan. Never told anyone at Bellissimo about him, about why I'd left, about the 3 years of bruises and apologies and hollow promises. Carmen knew I was running from something, but not who.
Not his name.
How? My voice came out as a whisper. I never told you. I know. He dropped the cigarette and crushed it under his heel. I make it my business to know who works for me, especially when they show up out of nowhere with a kind of fear in their eyes that only comes from someone who's been hunted. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, sleek and expensive, its engine purring like a predator. The driver, one of the men I'd seen lingering near Luca, stepped out and opened the back door. Brent gestured toward the car. Go home, Marjorie.
Get some rest.
But I couldn't move. Couldn't stop staring at him. This man who somehow knew the name I'd been running from, who spoke about my ex-boyfriend like he was a problem that had already been solved. What did you do? The question escaped before I could stop it. For the first time since I'd met him, Brent smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I made sure he understood that you're under my protection now. That touching you would be. He paused, considering his words. Unwise. Under my protection. The phrase wrapped around my chest like a vice. I didn't ask for her. You didn't have to. He opened the car door wider. A clear dismissal. This city has rules, Marjorie. You're in my territory now. That means you're mine to protect.
Meaning?
The word echoed in my head as I climbed into the sedan, my legs moving on autopilot. The driver closed the door behind me with a soft click that sounded too much like a lock engaging. Through the tinted window, I watched Brent light another cigarette and disappear back into the shadows beside Bellissimo. The driver pulled away from the curb, and I sat in the leather seat, trembling, trying to understand what had just happened. He'd known. About Stan.
About me.
About everything I'd been running from, which meant he'd been watching, digging into my past. Probably from the moment I'd walked through his door with my box-dye hair and second-hand clothes. The thought should have terrified me, should have sent me running again. But instead, all I could think was, Stan won't find me. I'm safe. Even if that safety came with strings I couldn't yet see. My apartment door was open. Not wide open, just an inch, maybe less. But I knew I'd locked it that morning. Had checked it twice before leaving, the way I did every single day. My hand froze on the doorknob, my heart hammering. The pepper spray was out of my purse before I consciously decided to reach for it. I pushed the door open slowly, listening for movement inside. Nothing. Just the hum of my refrigerator and the distant sound of my neighbor's television through the thin walls. I stepped inside, my thumb on the pepper spray trigger, and flicked on the light. Everything looked normal. My few pieces of furniture untouched. The dishes I'd left in the sink still there. My laptop closed on the small table exactly where I'd left it. But someone had been here. I could feel it. The subtle wrongness in the air, like the apartment had been disturbed and put back together just slightly off. I checked the bathroom. The closet. Under the bed. Nothing. Then I saw it. On my nightstand, beside my alarm clock, sat an unmarked envelope. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was thick, heavier than it should have been. I opened it carefully, as if it might explode. Inside was a phone, new, expensive, the kind I could never have afforded. And tucked beneath it, a slip of paper with a message written in neat, masculine handwriting. Use this. You're safer this way.
No signature. No explanation.
Just a command dressed up as concern. I sank onto the edge of my bed, the phone heavy in my palm, my mind racing. Someone had been in my apartment. Had walked past my locks like they didn't exist. Had left this phone on my nightstand like an offering or a leash. And I knew exactly who. Brent Marino. He'd known about Stan, about my past, about where I lived. How long had he been watching me? Since I'd walked into Bellissimo that first day? Since before that, maybe, since I'd first arrived in this city, desperate and alone? You're in my territory now. That means you're mine to protect. I looked at the phone in my hand, at the message that wasn't a request. You're safer this way.
Safe.
That word again. The one that had haunted me since I'd left Stan. The one I'd chased across state lines into the arms of another man who wanted to control me. Only this time, the control came wrapped in expensive suits and quiet authority. This time, it wore the face of protection. I should have thrown the phone away. Should have packed my bag and run again, the way I'd been running for months. But I didn't. Because somewhere between pouring wine upstairs and standing on that street corner, between Brent's knowing eyes and his promise that Stan wouldn't find me, I'd made a choice. Or maybe the choice had been made for me weeks ago, and I was only now realizing it. I turned on the phone. It powered up smoothly, the screen glowing in the dim light of my apartment. One contact was already programmed in.
BM.
That's all. Just initials. But I knew who it was. Knew that if I called that number, he would answer. I set the phone on my nightstand beside the note and stared at it for a long time. Outside, a car engine idled. I went to the window and looked down at the street. A black sedan sat across from my building, its windows dark, its occupant invisible. But I knew someone was inside. Watching. Waiting. Keeping me safe. Or keeping me trapped. I wasn't sure anymore if there was a difference. Want to know what happens when Marjorie confronts Brent about the surveillance? Click on the subscribe button. Comments are open. What would you do in Marjorie's position? Is Brent protecting her or possessing her? Share your thoughts below. The sedan was there again. Fourth night in a row. Same spot across from my building, parked beneath the broken streetlight where the shadows were deepest. Black paint that gleamed like oil even in the darkness. Windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. I stood at my apartment window. The new phone Brent had given me heavy in my hand, and told myself I was being paranoid. It was just a car. People parked on streets. It didn't mean anything. Except it was always the same car. Always in the same spot. And it only appeared after I got home from my shifts at Bellissimo. I tried to catch a glimpse of the driver twice now, lingering on my walk from the bus stop, pretending to search for my keys while I watched from the corner of my eye. But the windows were too dark, and whoever was inside never got out. Just sat there, a silent sentinel, until I disappeared into my building. You're being paranoid, I told myself, the same words I'd been repeating for 4 days. Stan can't find you. Brent said so. But paranoia had kept me alive for 3 years. I'd learned to trust the crawling sensation at the back of my neck, the instinct that whispered danger when everything looked calm. Only this time, the danger felt different. Not immediate. Not violent. Almost protective. And that scared me more than anything. On the 5th night, I decided to do something about it. My shift ended at midnight. Carmen walked out with me as usual, chattering about a regular who'd left her $100 tip and asked for her number. Like I'd ever date a customer, she laughed, shaking her head. That's rule number 1, right? I made appropriately supportive noises, but my attention was on the street ahead, scanning for that familiar gleam of black paint.
There.
Same spot. Waiting. You okay? Carmen's voice cut through my distraction. You've been jumpy all week.
Fine.
Just tired. She studied me with those knowing eyes, then glanced in the direction I'd been looking. If she saw the sedan, she didn't mention it. Get some rest. See you tomorrow. I watched her walk to her bus stop, then took a deep breath and crossed the street, directly toward the black sedan. My heart hammered against my ribs. The pepper spray was in my purse, my fingers already wrapped around it. If this was Stan, if somehow he'd found me despite Brent's promises, I'd be ready. But when I got close enough to see through the windshield, the face that looked back at me wasn't Stan's. It was the driver. Brent's driver. The same man who'd taken me home that night outside Bellissimo. He rolled down the window slowly, his expression neutral. Miss Hayes. Why are you following me? My voice came out harder than I felt, anger masking fear. Not following. Watching. He said it like there was a meaningful difference. Mr. Marino asked me to make sure you get home safe. The casual way he said it, like it was completely normal to park outside someone's apartment every night, made my stomach twist. I don't need, I started, but he was already rolling the window back up, a clear dismissal. The sedan's engine purred to life, and he pulled away from the curb, leaving me standing alone on the sidewalk with my pulse racing and 1,000 questions burning in my throat. I confronted Brent the next day. Or rather, I tried to. He was in his office when I arrived for my shift, the one place I'd never dared go without being summoned. But anger gave me courage, or maybe just recklessness. I knocked twice and didn't wait for permission before pushing the door open. He looked up from his desk, one eyebrow raised, a pen poised over some document I couldn't see. Marjorie, this is unexpected. Your driver has been parked outside my apartment every night this week. I stayed in the doorway, my hand still on the knob, ready to flee. I want to know why. Brent set down his pen with deliberate care.
Come in.
Close the door. I'd rather. Close the door, Marjorie. His voice never rose, but something in it made my hand obey before my mind caught up. The door clicked shut behind me. The sound felt too much like a trap. He stood and came around the desk, leaning against it with his arms crossed, casual, relaxed, like we were discussing the weather instead of surveillance. I apologize. I should have mentioned it. Mentioned it. My voice cracked. You had someone watching me, following me home, sitting outside my apartment like I'm making sure you're safe. He said it so calmly, so reasonably, that it took a moment for the words to land. Stan might have gotten the message, but that doesn't mean there aren't other threats. This city isn't kind to women who walk home alone at midnight. So, you decided to have me watched? Without asking? Without your permission, yes. He didn't sound remotely apologetic despite his earlier words. Because if I'd asked, you would have said no. You would have insisted you were fine, that you could take care of yourself. And I would have done it anyway because that's what protection looks like. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. That's not protection. That's surveillance. That's control. He tilted his head, studying me. Is that what you think this is? Isn't it? Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or frustration. He pushed away from the desk and closed the distance between us in 3 strides. I backed up instinctively until my shoulders hit the door. You think I'm like him? It wasn't a question.
Stan.
You think I'm trying to trap you, aren't you? The words came out as a whisper. He stopped a foot away, close enough that I could see the muscle ticking in his jaw, the intensity in those blue eyes. If I wanted to trap you, Marjorie, you'd already be trapped. I have the resources. The power. I could have put you in an apartment I own, given you a phone that tracks your every move. He paused, and I realized with a jolt that he'd already done that last part. I could control every aspect of your life if I wanted to. But I don't. Do you know why? I couldn't answer. Couldn't move. Because fear isn't loyalty. It's not trust. It's just fear. He stepped back, giving me space I desperately needed. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to keep you safe so you have the freedom to choose whether you want to stay or go. But you're still watching me. Yes. He didn't deny it. Until I'm certain the threat is gone. Until you stop flinching every time someone raises their voice. Until you can walk down a street without looking over your shoulder. His voice softened. Call it surveillance if you want. But from where I'm standing, it's the only way I know how to help. The sincerity in his voice undid something in me. Made my anger waver. Replaced it with something more dangerous. Confusion. Relief. And underneath it all, a tentative, terrifying sense of comfort. I don't know what you want from me, I said quietly. Nothing you're not ready to give. He moved toward his desk, creating distance, giving me room to breathe. The car will stay. You're welcome to tell him to leave any time you want. He'll listen. Will he? Brent's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Probably not. But it'll make you feel better to try. Despite everything, the anger, the fear, the certainty that I should run, I felt my lips twitch. Almost a smile. Almost. Go on. He picked up his pen, returning to his paperwork as if we'd just discussed scheduling instead of surveillance. Your shift starts in 10 minutes. Don't be late. It was a dismissal, but a gentle one. I turned to leave, my hand on the doorknob, when his voice stopped me. Marjorie. I looked back. He was watching me with that intensity that always made me feel exposed, seen in ways I didn't want to be. You're trembling. I was. I hadn't noticed until he said it, but my hands were shaking, my whole body taut with adrenaline. He crossed the room again, slower this time, giving me every opportunity to flee. When he reached me, he lifted one hand and brushed a strand of hair that had escaped my bun behind my ear. The touch was so gentle it made my throat tight. His fingers barely grazed my skin, but I felt it like an electric current. Don't be. His voice was barely above a whisper. Not with me. For 3 years, every touch had been a prelude to pain. Every gentle moment with Stan had been followed by violence, by rage, by reminders that his kindness was conditional and could be revoked at any second. But Brent's touch held no threat. No warning. Just warmth and steadiness and a promise I didn't dare believe. It terrified me more than any of Stan's violence ever had. Because violence I knew how to survive. Violence I could run from. But gentleness? Protection? The kind of care that wrapped around you like silk until you couldn't tell the difference between safety and captivity? That was how you got trapped forever. I pulled back, my breath coming too fast. My shift. Go. He dropped his hand, stepped back. I'll see you later. I fled. Down the stairs, through the kitchen, into the safety of preparation and routine and familiar work. But hours later, when my shift ended and I walked home, the black sedan was there again. And this time, when I saw it, I didn't feel afraid. I felt something far more dangerous. I felt safe. 3 weeks after the confrontation in Brent's office, I realized I'd stopped checking the locks. Not consciously. Not as a decision. But one morning I woke up and got ready for my shift without that ritual that had defined my life since leaving Stan. Testing the deadbolt, rattling the chain, checking the window locks twice before I could breathe properly. I just left. And the black sedan was there when I got home, as always. A silent promise in the darkness. I'd stopped being afraid of it somewhere along the way. Started sleeping better, knowing it was there. That should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 3 years. The signs were everywhere once I started looking. Brent knew my schedule better than I did. When Luca posted the weekly shifts, mine were always the good ones, Friday and Saturday nights when tips were highest, never the dreaded Sunday lunch crowd. My section was always positioned away from the kitchen doors where it got too hot, away from the bar where drunk customers got handsy. You're lucky, one of the other servers, Michelle, muttered one Friday night. I've been here 2 years, and I've never gotten this kind of treatment. I didn't tell her it wasn't luck. Then there were the meals. Staff ate for free during breaks, but suddenly my orders started coming out exactly how I liked them without me saying anything. Extra lemon in my water. No onions in my salads. The pasta I'd mentioned once to Carmen was offered as the special the next week. Mr. Marino must have good instincts, the kitchen manager said when I thanked him. Instincts.
Right.
And Brent himself, always there, always watching. Not obviously. Not in a way that felt oppressive. But I'd feel his gaze on me during service, look up to find him on the balcony or emerging from his office, his eyes tracking me across the dining room. He never approached me during shifts, never interfered with my work. But his presence was a constant weight, like gravity, invisible but inescapable. He's watching you. Carmen's voice startled me out of my thoughts. We were folding napkins in the quiet hour before dinner service, the restaurant empty except for prep staff. What? Mr. Marino. She didn't look up from the precise fold she was making. He's always watching you. You noticed that? My hands stilled. I'm sure he watches all of us. Not like that. She set down her napkin and met my eyes. Look, I like you, Marjorie. You're a good worker. You keep your head down. But you need to understand something. Protection can feel a lot like possession. The word possession hit like a slap. It's not like that. Isn't it? Carmen leaned back in her chair. He knows your schedule, your preferences, where you live. He has someone watching your apartment every night. That's not normal boss behavior. He's just making sure I'm safe. Safe from what?
Stan.
She tilted her head. Or safe for him? I wanted to argue. Wanted to defend Brent's actions as reasonable, protective, nothing more than what any good employer would do. But the words died in my throat because deep down, I knew she was right. This wasn't normal. Wasn't just protection. It was something else. Something that felt dangerously like being claimed. Just be careful, Carmen said softly. Men like Mr. Marino. They don't do anything without a reason. And they don't let go of things they consider theirs. The customer grabbed my wrist during the Saturday dinner rush. Middle-aged, expensive suit, too much wine. I'd seen the type 100 times. Men who thought money bought them the right to touch. Another bottle, sweetheart. And maybe your number while you're at it. His grip tightened when I tried to pull away, his fingers digging into my skin hard enough to bruise. I froze. My body knew this grip. Knew what came after when you fought back. Let go. My voice came out steady despite the panic clawing at my throat. Come on, don't be like that. I'm a generous tipper. The lady asked you to let go. Brent's voice cut through the noise of the restaurant like a blade. Low, quiet, but with an edge that made everything else fade into silence. The man's head snapped up. His grip loosened but didn't release. You were just leaving. Brent appeared beside our table, his presence filling the space. He wasn't tall, maybe 6 feet, but he carried himself like a man twice that size. Your meal is complimentary. Luca will call you a cab. You won't be returning to Bellissimo. The customer's face flushed red. Now wait just a minute. Brent's hand settled on the man's shoulder. Gentle, almost friendly, but something in the gesture made the blood drain from the man's face. You're hurting one of my employees. Brent's voice never rose above conversational. That's unacceptable. So you have 2 choices. Leave now with your dignity intact, or leave in a way that's much less pleasant. Your decision. The grip on my wrist disappeared. The man stood, straightened his jacket, and left without another word. Luca materialized to escort him out, and the restaurant's ambient noise slowly resumed as other diners returned to their meals. But I stood frozen, my wrist throbbing, my heart hammering, staring at Brent. He turned to me, his expression softening fractionally. Are you hurt? I shook my head, not trusting my voice. His gaze dropped to my wrist, where red marks were already forming in the shape of fingers. Something dark flickered across his face. Take your break. Elena will cover your section.
Ai fine.
I can. That wasn't a request, Marjorie. His eyes met mine, and the intensity there stole my breath. Take your break. That's an order. I fled to the staff room, my legs shaking, and sank into a chair with my head in my hands. Stan used to grab me like that. Harder, meaner, but the same ownership in the grip. The same assumption that my body belonged to him. But Brent had stopped it. Had defended me without hesitation. And I couldn't tell if that made me want to thank him or run from him. Maybe both. The invitation came at the end of my shift. Luca found me as I was counting my tips in the now-empty restaurant. Mr. Marino would like you to join him for dinner. Upstairs. My stomach dropped.
Now.
If you're willing. Luca's expression was unreadable. It's not mandatory. But he'd appreciate your company. Not mandatory. But we both knew refusing wasn't really an option. I followed Luca up the back stairs to the private dining room, the one I'd only entered once before, the night I'd overheard talk of shipments and territories. But tonight it looked different. The large table had been cleared away, replaced by something smaller, more intimate. 2 place settings, simple but elegant. Candles burned low, casting golden light across dark wood and burgundy leather. Wine glasses waited to be filled. And Brent stood by the window, his back to me, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city lights below. You can go, Luca. He didn't turn around. The door closed behind me with a soft click. You don't have to stay, Brent said quietly. I won't be offended if you'd rather go home. I should have left. Should have thanked him for the invitation and walked out. But my feet carried me forward instead, deeper into the room, closer to him. Why did you invite me? He turned then, and the look in his eyes made my breath catch. Not hungry, not predatory, something softer, more dangerous. Because I wanted to have dinner with you. He gestured to one of the chairs.
No ulterior motive.
No business discussion. Just dinner. I sat because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. He moved with practiced grace, pulling a bottle from the wine fridge built into the wall, uncorking it with ease. When he poured, his movements were precise, controlled. Everything about him was controlled. Except his eyes. Those betrayed something deeper. You defended me tonight, I said as he took the seat across from me. With that customer. He touched you without permission. That's unacceptable. Brent lifted his glass. In my restaurant. In my city. Under my protection.
My.
Always my. Carmen thinks you're possessive. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Carmen's perceptive. The admission startled me. You're not going to deny it? Why would I? He took a sip of wine, studying me over the rim of his glass. I don't lie, Marjorie. Not to you. Yes, I'm possessive. Yes, I keep track of you. Yes, I make sure you're safe even when you don't ask for it. He set down his glass. But I'm not Stan. I don't hurt what's mine. I protect it. What's mine? The words should have sent me running. Should have triggered every alarm bell forged in 3 years of abuse. But instead, they settled into my chest like warmth spreading through cold limbs. I don't belong to you, I whispered. Don't you? He leaned forward, elbows on the table, his gaze never leaving mine. You wear my protection like armor. Sleep better knowing my driver is outside. Haven't looked over your shoulder in weeks. You've stopped running, Marjorie. Stopped hiding. Because somewhere in the past month, you decided you were safe with me. He was right. God help me, he was right. I don't protect people I don't care about, he said softly. And I care about you more than I should. The confession hung between us, heavy and undeniable. I picked up my wine glass with trembling hands and took a long drink, needing something to do, some way to process the truth settling into my bones. I was falling. Had been falling since that first night, maybe. Since he'd looked at my bruise and promised no one would hurt me again. And the most terrifying part? I didn't want to stop. The summons came during the Thursday lunch shift. Luca appeared at my elbow while I was refilling water glasses for table 6, his expression unreadable. Mr. Marino needs to see you.
Now.
My stomach dropped. I'm in the middle of. Michelle will cover your section. He was already walking away, expecting me to follow. I caught Carmen's eye across the dining room. She gave me a look that was half sympathy, half warning, then turned back to her table. The walk to Brent's office felt longer than usual. My mind raced through possibilities. Had I made a mistake? Offended a customer? Broken some unspoken rule I didn't know existed? But when Luca knocked and pushed open the door, Brent's expression wasn't angry. It was worse. It was careful, controlled. The look of a man about to deliver news he knew would detonate. Sit down, Marjorie. His voice was gentle, which only made my anxiety spike higher. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk, my hands twisting in my lap. Luca closed the door behind me, and the soft click made my pulse jump. We were alone. Brent stood by the window, his back to me, hands in his pockets. The afternoon light cut across his shoulders, highlighting the tension in his frame. I need to show you something, he said without turning around. And I need you to understand that everything I've done has been to keep you safe. The preamble sent ice through my veins. What did you do? He turned then, and the weight in his eyes made my breath catch. Without a word, he moved to his desk and picked up a manila folder. Thick, worn at the edges, like it had been opened many times. My name was written on the tab in neat block letters. Marjorie Hayes. He set it on the desk, between us like a confession. Open it. My hands shook as I reached for the folder. Part of me knew that whatever was inside would change everything. that this was a threshold I couldn't uncross. But I opened it anyway. The first page was a police report. My police report from 2 years ago, when Stan had broken my ribs and a neighbor had called 911 before I could stop them. The photos were still clipped to it. My bruised torso, the finger marks on my throat, my swollen face staring at the camera with dead eyes. I couldn't breathe. The second page was the restraining order I'd filed 3 months before I ran. The one Stan had violated twice before I gave up on the police ever helping me. The third page was Stan's driver's license photo. His information. His address, the apartment I'd fled from in the middle of the night. The fourth page was my old address. My employment history. My social security number. And beneath that, receipts. Hotel records showing where I'd stayed the first week after leaving. Bus tickets. A copy of my lease for this apartment, this supposedly safe, anonymous apartment. Everything. Every step of my journey. Every place I'd tried to hide. All of it documented in neat, clinical detail. My vision blurred. The folder slipped from my numb fingers and landed on the desk with a soft thud that sounded too loud in the heavy silence. How long? My voice came out as a whisper. How long have you been following me? Brent's jaw tightened. I wasn't following you. I was.
How long?
Each word was a shard of glass in my throat. He exhaled slowly. Since you arrived in the city. The motel you stayed at, I own it. The clerk noticed you checking the locks obsessively, jumping at every sound. She called my security team, thought you might be in danger. When they looked into your background. He trailed off, but he didn't need to finish. I understood perfectly. When they looked into my background, they found the police reports, the restraining order, the pattern of abuse that screamed victim in bold letters. And Brent had decided I needed saving. You had no right. My hands clenched into fists on my lap. No right to dig into my past, to follow me, to... Stan put you in the hospital twice. His voice was still calm, maddeningly calm. The second time, you told the doctors you fell down the stairs. They didn't believe you. I read their notes. They documented injuries consistent with being kicked repeatedly while on the ground. Stop. I wanted to scream at him to stop, but my throat had closed. The restraining order you filed listed threats against your life. Documented strangulation attempts. And then you dropped it 3 weeks later and went back to him. He moved around the desk, not close enough to touch, but close enough that I had to look up to meet his eyes. You went back because you had nowhere else to go. No family.
No savings.
No support system. So you went back to a man who was going to kill you eventually because that seemed safer than being homeless. Tears burned behind my eyes. You don't know what it was like. You're right. I don't. His voice softened fractionally. But I know what it looked like from the outside. And when you showed up at Bellissimo with box-dye hair and bruises you tried to cover, looking over your shoulder every 5 seconds, I knew exactly what you were running from. So, you decided to invade my privacy? To have me followed and investigated like someone worth protecting. He crouched down so we were eye level, and the intensity in his gaze pinned me in place. You don't have to run anymore, Marjorie. Stan won't come near you. Won't call. Won't text. Won't so much as think about you without remembering what happens to men who touch what's mine. You had someone follow me, I whispered, the truth finally crystallizing. From the beginning. Before I even applied here. You knew everything before you hired me. Yes. The simple admission was somehow worse than if he'd tried to deny it. Why? My voice cracked. Why would you do that? Something flickered across his face, emotion he usually kept locked away. Because the first time I saw you, you were standing in my restaurant looking like the world had beaten you down, but you were still standing. Still fighting. And I thought, he paused, choosing his words carefully. I thought, here's someone who deserves to feel safe. Someone who's earned the right to stop looking over her shoulder. That wasn't your decision to make. No, he agreed. It wasn't, but I made it anyway. The honesty of it stole my breath. He wasn't apologizing. Wasn't pretending he regretted it. He was simply stating facts, laying his actions bare and daring me to judge them. I had someone protect you, he continued, his voice low and steady. Not follow you. Protect you. Make sure Stan got the message. Make sure you could sleep at night without wondering if he'd found you. Make sure that when you walked into Bellissimo, you were walking into a place where no one would ever hurt you again. By taking away my choice, I stood abruptly, needing distance, needing air. By deciding what I needed without asking, that's not protection, Brent. That's control. He stood as well, not approaching, just watching me with those two knowing eyes.
Yes.
It is. I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. The admission hung between us like a challenge. But here's what you need to understand. He moved to the window, giving me space. Every choice you've made since leaving Stan has been about survival. About running. About hiding. You haven't been free, Marjorie. You've been trapped in a different kind of cage. One made of fear instead of fists. His words hit like physical blows because they were true. Every decision, every movement, every breath had been calculated around the possibility of Stan finding me. I took that fear away, Brent continued quietly. I gave you the freedom to stop running, to sleep through the night, to walk down the street without constantly looking over your shoulder. If that makes me a monster in your eyes, I can live with that. I stared at the folder on his desk, all my secrets, my shame, my trauma documented in clinical detail, evidence of his surveillance, proof that I'd never been as hidden as I'd thought. What do you want from me? The question came out broken. Why tell me this now? He turned from the window, and the look in his eyes made my heart stutter. Because you were starting to trust me, starting to feel safe. And I won't build something on lies. He gestured to the folder. This is the truth. All of it. What you do with it is your choice. My choice. I laughed, and it sounded slightly hysterical. You've been controlling every aspect of my life for months, and now you're giving me a choice. Yes. He didn't flinch from the accusation in my voice. You can walk out that door. Quit Bellissimo. Leave this city if you want. I won't stop you. The protection stays either way. Stan won't find you wherever you go. But you're free to leave me.
Leave me.
Not leave the job. Leave him. Because that's what this had become, hadn't it? Not just employment. Not just protection. Possession wrapped in velvet. Control disguised as care. And the most terrifying part was that I'd been complicit in it. Had felt safe because of his surveillance. Had slept better knowing his driver watched my apartment. I'd traded one cage for another. Only this one had better lighting and a man who'd never raised his voice to me. I walked to the door on trembling legs, my hand on the knob, my whole body shaking with the weight of what I'd learned. Marjorie. I didn't turn around. I don't regret it, he said softly. Any of it. Because you're alive. You're safe. And you're here. I opened the door and walked out. Down the hallway. Past Luca, who took one look at my face and said nothing. Through the kitchen where staff parted silently. Into the dining room where Carmen's eyes widened in concern. I kept walking until I reached the staff room, locked myself in, and sank to the floor with my back against the door. My breath came in short gasps. My vision swam. I had someone protect you. But protection and prison both had locks. The only difference was who held the key. And Brent Marino had been holding mine since the day I arrived. I'd never been free. Not when I left Stan. Not when I came to this city. Not when I walked through Bellissimo's doors. I'd just traded one captor for another. One who was smarter, quieter, and infinitely more dangerous because he made captivity feel like sanctuary. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The new one. The one he gave me. One message. From BM. Take the rest of the day off. Your shift is covered. Go home. Rest. We'll talk when you're ready. Even now. Even after showing me the depths of his surveillance, he was still directing my movements. Still making decisions for me. Still holding the key. I should have been furious. Should have thrown the phone against the wall and run. But instead, I did exactly what he told me. I went home. Because he was right about one thing. I was tired of running. Even if stopping meant surrendering. The storm hit on a Saturday night, 3 days after the folder. I'd gone back to work. What else was I supposed to do? Sit in my apartment staring at walls, wondering if Brent's driver was still outside? Run again, knowing he'd find me anyway? So, I showed up for my shift, kept my head down, and tried not to think about manila folders or the weight of eyes that saw everything. Brent hadn't approached me, hadn't summoned me to his office or cornered me during breaks. He was just there. Always there. A presence on the balcony, in the shadows, watching with that quiet intensity that made my skin prickle. Waiting. The storm rolled in around 9 o'clock. Thunder that shook the windows. Rain that fell in sheets, so thick the city lights blurred into impressionist paintings. The lights in Bellissimo flickered once, twice, then stabilized on the backup generator. Weather like this always brings out the crazy ones, Carmen muttered, refilling salt shakers at the server station. Watch. We'll get at least one disaster table before closing. She had no idea how right she was. It happened during the 10 o'clock seating. I was taking an order from table 12, an anniversary couple who couldn't decide between the risotto and the osso buco when the front doors burst open. The sound cut through the ambient noise like a gunshot. Conversation stopped. Silverware froze midair. A man stood in the doorway, rain streaming off him in rivulets, his clothes plastered to his body. His hair was darker than I remembered, his face thinner, but I'd know that shape anywhere. The slope of his shoulders. The way he stood with his weight on his right leg because of the old football injury.
Stun.
My entire body turned to ice. Marjorie. His voice, that voice that had whispered sweet things and screamed terrible ones, that had promised forever and threatened death, tore through the elegant atmosphere of Bellissimo like a blade through silk. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. My notepad slipped from numb fingers and clattered to the floor. This wasn't possible. Brent had said he'd promised. I know you're here. Stan took a step inside, water pooling around his feet on the marble floor. His eyes were wild, searching. You can't hide from me. You think you can just leave? Just fucking disappear? Elena appeared from nowhere, positioning herself between Stan and the dining room with the calm of someone who dealt with difficult situations before. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Fuck off. He tried to push past her. Marjorie. That's when Brent's security materialized. Two men, the ones I'd seen lingering near the bar, the ones I'd assumed were just well-dressed customers, moved with practiced efficiency. They intercepted Stan before he made it 3 feet past the hostess stand, their hands gripping his arms with enough force to stop his momentum. Let go of me. Stan struggled, but they held him easily. That's my girlfriend. She's Marjorie. Get out here. I stood frozen at table 12, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. The anniversary couple stared at me with wide eyes, and I realized with horror that everyone was looking at me now. Every diner, every staff member, all of them watching as my past exploded into my present. Sir, you need to leave.
Now.
Luca appeared, his voice carrying authority. Or we'll call the police. Call them. Stan's laugh was ugly, manic. Tell them my girlfriend is being held here against her will. Tell them. I'm not your girlfriend. The words left my mouth before I could stop them, and suddenly I was moving, pushing past tables, drawn forward by something I couldn't name. Anger.
Fear.
The desperate need to make this stop before it destroyed the fragile safety I'd found here. I stopped 10 feet away from him, and the security team shifted to keep themselves between us. Stan's eyes locked onto mine, and the expression on his face made my stomach turn. Love and hatred mixed with something that looked like relief. Baby. His voice gentled, turned into the tone he used after the bad nights. The apology voice. Baby, I've been looking everywhere for you. I was so worried. Why did you run? Why didn't you just... You know why. It wasn't that bad. You know, I didn't mean to. I was just stressed. We can work through this. We always do. Get out. My voice shook but held. Get out and don't come back. His face twisted. You don't mean that. You're confused. These people, his eyes darted to the security team, to Luca, searching. They've brainwashed you or something. This is kidnapping. This is. She asked you to leave. Brent's voice cut through Stan's babbling like a knife through flesh. I looked up. He stood at the top of the balcony stairs, perfectly still, his hands in his pockets. His expression was calm, almost pleasant, but something in his eyes promised violence. Who the fuck are you? Stan struggled against the hands holding him. You the one keeping her here? You think you can just steal someone's? She's not yours to steal. Brent descended the stairs slowly, each step measured and precise. She never was. The air in the restaurant changed, thickened. Even the security team looked tense, like they knew what was coming. Marjorie, get behind the bar. Brent's voice never rose, but it carried absolute authority.
Now.
I obeyed without thinking, my feet moving on autopilot. Carmen grabbed my arm as I passed, pulled me close, her face pale. Brent reached the bottom of the stairs and nodded to his security team. Outside. All of you. Mr. Marino, Luca started. It's fine, Luca. We're just going to have a conversation. That terrible, pleasant smile.
Arenteve, Stan.
Stan's face flushed red. I don't know who you think you are, but Marjorie is coming with me. She's what? Brent tilted his head. Yours? Your property? Your punching bag when you've had too much to drink. The restaurant was dead silent now. Even the kitchen had gone quiet. I don't know what she told you, but she didn't have to tell me anything. Brent's voice dropped to something soft and deadly. The police reports told me everything I needed to know. The hospital records. The restraining order you violated. Twice. Stan's eyes widened. How did you? Outside.
Now.
Unless you want to have this conversation in front of all these witnesses. For a moment, I thought Stan would refuse. Thought he'd lunge at Brent or make a scene. But something in Brent's eyes, some promise of consequences, made Stan's bravado crumble.
Fine.
He wrenched himself free from the security team's loosened grip. But this isn't over. Marjorie. Go. Brent gestured toward the door. They walked out into the storm, Brent, Stan, and the two security men. The door closed behind them, muffling the thunder. I couldn't breathe.
Couldn't think.
Carmen was saying something, but I couldn't hear her over the roaring in my ears. I pushed away from the bar and ran. Through the dining room, past Luca's protests. Out the front door into the rain. The storm hit me like a physical force. Rain soaked through my uniform in seconds, plastering my hair to my face, but I didn't care. They stood in the street, Brent and Stan facing each other while the security team flanked them like sentinels. The rain turned everything into watercolor, blurred and surreal. Don't care who you think you are, Stan was saying, his voice raw. She's mine. We've been together 3 years. And you spent 3 years breaking her. Brent's voice was barely audible over the storm, but somehow I heard every word. Breaking her down until she believed she deserved it. Until she thought she had nowhere else to go. You don't know anything about us. I know everything about you, Stan Cooper. Born August 14th, 1989. Currently unemployed. Currently living in your mother's basement after your landlord evicted you for property damage. Brent took a step closer. I know about the DUI. The assault charge from the bar fight. The anger management classes you stopped attending after 2 sessions. Stan's face went white. How? I make it my business to know about threats. Another step. And you're a threat to something that belongs to me. She doesn't belong to you. Stan's voice cracked. You can't just. No one touches what's mine. The words were delivered with such absolute certainty, such unshakable conviction, that they seemed to echo despite the thunder. Brent moved, faster than I'd ever seen him move. One moment, he was standing 3 feet away from Stan. The next, his hand was wrapped around Stan's throat, slamming him back against a parked car. You're going to leave the city, Brent said quietly, his face inches from Stan's.
Tonight.
You're going to go back to wherever you crawled from, and you're going to forget Marjorie Hayes exists. Because if you don't, if I hear you've tried to contact her, try to find her, even said her name, you'll discover that there are worse things than prison. Stan clawed at Brent's wrist, his face turning red, but Brent didn't release him. Do you understand me? Stan managed a jerky nod. Brent released him, and Stan collapsed against the car, gasping. You're fucking crazy. Yes. Brent straightened his collar, calm as if he'd just finished a business meeting. Now get in the car. One of the security men had pulled up a black sedan. He opened the back door, waiting. Stan looked at me, then really looked at me, and I saw the moment he understood. The moment he realized he'd lost. Not just me, but any power he'd ever had over me. Marjorie, he said, and his voice was broken, pathetic.
Please.
We can fix this. I love you. The words that would have shattered me months ago bounced off like rain on glass. No, you don't, I said quietly. You never did. He opened his mouth, closed it, then stumbled toward the sedan. The door shut behind him, and the car pulled away into the storm, taillights disappearing into the rain like a bad dream fading. I stood there, soaked to the bone, shaking from adrenaline and cold and the horror of what I'd just witnessed. Brent turned to me, rain streaming down his face, his white shirt transparent against his skin. You're safe now, he said. But the words felt like a cage door slamming shut. Because yes, I was safe. Stan was gone. The threat was eliminated. But I just watched Brent Marino choke a man in the street with the calm of someone accustomed to violence. Watched him deliver threats with the certainty of someone who could and would follow through. I'd traded one kind of danger for another. And the most terrifying part? I wasn't sure I wanted to trade back. Stan's face flushed red. I don't know who you think you are, but Marjorie is coming with me. She's what? Brent tilted his head. Yours? Your property? Your punching bag when you've had too much to drink. The restaurant was dead silent now. Even the kitchen had gone quiet. I don't know what she told you, but she didn't have to tell me anything. Brent's voice dropped to something soft and deadly. The police reports told me everything I needed to know. The hospital records. The restraining order you violated. Twice. Stan's eyes widened. How did you? Outside.
Now.
Unless you want to have this conversation in front of all these witnesses. For a moment, I thought Stan would refuse. Thought he'd lunge at Brent or make a scene. But something in Brent's eyes, some promise of consequences, made Stan's bravado crumble.
Seen it.
He wrenched himself free from the security team's loosened grip. But this isn't over. Marjorie. Go. Brent gestured toward the door. They walked out into the storm, Brent, Stan, and the two security men. The door closed behind them, muffling the thunder. I couldn't breathe.
Couldn't think.
Carmen was saying something, but I couldn't hear her over the roaring in my ears. I pushed away from the bar and ran. Through the dining room, past Luca's protests. Out the front door into the rain. The storm hit me like a physical force. Rain soaked through my uniform in seconds, plastering my hair to my face, but I didn't care. They stood in the street, Brent and Stan facing each other while the security team flanked them like sentinels. The rain turned everything into watercolor, blurred and surreal. Don't care who you think you are, Stan was saying, his voice raw. She's mine. We've been together 3 years. And you spent 3 years breaking her. Brent's voice was barely audible over the storm, but somehow I heard every word. Breaking her down until she believed she deserved it. Until she thought she had nowhere else to go. You don't know anything about us. I know everything about you, Stan Cooper. Born August 14th, 1989. Currently unemployed. Currently living in your mother's basement after your landlord evicted you for property damage. Brent took a step closer. I know about the DUI. The assault charge from the bar fight. The anger management classes you stopped attending after 2 sessions. Stan's face went white. How? I make it my business to know about threats. Another step. And you're a threat to something that belongs to me. She doesn't belong to you. Stan's voice cracked. You can't just. No one touches what's mine. The words were delivered with such absolute certainty, such unshakable conviction, that they seemed to echo despite the thunder. Brent moved, faster than I'd ever seen him move. One moment, he was standing 3 feet away from Stan. The next, his hand was wrapped around Stan's throat, slamming him back against a parked car. "You're going to leave the city," Brent said quietly, his face inches from Stan's.
Tonight.
"You're going to go back to wherever you crawled from, and you're going to forget Marjorie Hayes exists. Because if you don't, if I hear you've tried to contact her, try to find her, even said her name, you'll discover that there are worse things than prison." Stan clawed at Brent's wrist, his face turning red, but Brent didn't release him. "Do you understand me?" Stan managed a jerky nod. Brent released him, and Stan collapsed against the car, gasping. You're fucking crazy." "Yes." Brent straightened his collar, calm as if he'd just finished a business meeting. "Now get in the car." One of the security men had pulled up a black sedan. He opened the back door, waiting. Stan looked at me, then really looked at me, and I saw the moment he understood. The moment he realized he'd lost. Not just me, but any power he'd ever had over me. "Marjorie," he said, and his voice was broken, pathetic.
"Please.
"We can fix this. I love you." The words that would have shattered me months ago bounced off like rain on glass. "No, you don't," I said quietly. "You never did." He opened his mouth, closed it, then stumbled toward the sedan. The door shut behind him, and the car pulled away into the storm, taillights disappearing into the rain like a bad dream fading. I stood there, soaked to the bone, shaking from adrenaline and cold and the horror of what I'd just witnessed. Brent turned to me, rain streaming down his face, his white shirt transparent against his skin. "You're safe now," he said. But the words felt like a cage door slamming shut. Because yes, I was safe. Stan was gone. The threat was eliminated. But I just watched Brent Marino choke a man in the street with the calm of someone accustomed to violence. Watched him deliver threats with the certainty of someone who could and would follow through. I'd traded one kind of danger for another. And the most terrifying part? I wasn't sure I wanted to trade back. I didn't go back to work for 3 days. Brent didn't call, didn't text on the phone he'd given me. Just let me be. But the black sedan was there every night, a silent reminder that even in absence, he was present. On the 4th day, he came to my apartment. I knew it was him before I opened the door. The knock was different from the landlord's impatient hammering or my neighbor's tentative tap. This was deliberate, patient, the knock of someone who knew they'd be let in eventually. I opened the door, and there he stood, impeccable as always despite the late hour. Charcoal suit, no tie, top button undone. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, tension in his jaw, but still perfectly controlled. "May I come in?" I should have said no. Should have told him I needed space, time, distance. I stepped aside and let him in. He entered my tiny apartment like he entered every space, claiming it without effort. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. He didn't sit, just stood by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the street below where his driver waited in that familiar sedan. "Stan left the city." He spoke without looking at me. "Took a bus to Cleveland 2 hours after our conversation. He won't be coming back." "Did you hurt him?" The question came out steadier than I felt. Brent turned then, his blue eyes catching the light from my single lamp. "Does it matter?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I needed to know what kind of man I'd let into my life. What kind of protection I'd accepted. Whether the violence I'd witnessed in the rain was an aberration or a pattern. But I couldn't say any of that, so I just stared at him, waiting. He sighed, a rare show of weariness. "I didn't hurt him. Not beyond what you saw. But I made it very clear what would happen if he ever came near you again. What I'm capable of. What resources I have." He paused. "Sometimes the threat of violence is more effective than the act itself. You choked him in the street. I restrained him." His voice was maddeningly calm. "There's a difference. He was aggressive. Threatening. I neutralized the threat. You could have called the police." "The police?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Marjorie, the police didn't help you when you had a restraining order. They didn't stop Stan from violating it twice. They didn't prevent him from putting you in the hospital. Why would I trust them to protect you now?" because that's how normal people handled things. Through legal channels. Through proper authorities. But we'd stopped being normal the moment I accepted his phone. His protection. His surveillance. You don't need to know the details, Brent said softly, moving closer. You don't need to carry the weight of what it took to make you safe. That's my burden, not yours. I'm not a child.
No.
You're a woman who's been through hell and deserves not to know what happens in the shadows to keep her safe. He stopped a foot away, close enough that I could smell his cologne, see the weariness in his eyes. You're free now, Marjorie. Really free. Stan won't come back. Won't call. Won't exist in your world anymore.
Free.
The word should have felt liberating. Instead, it felt like a lie wrapped in silk. Am I? I met his eyes, refusing to look away. Free? Something flickered across his face. What do you want me to say? The truth. The truth. He laughed a low, bitter sound. The truth is you've never been free. Not with Stan. Not when you ran.
Not now.
Because freedom is a myth we tell ourselves to feel better about the cages we choose. I didn't choose this cage. Didn't you? He gestured around my apartment. You could have left after you saw the folder. Could have run after Stan showed up. Could have told me to go to hell a dozen times over. But you didn't. You stayed. You came back to work. You let me in tonight. Because I had nowhere else to go. Because I was tired of running. Because some broken part of me had learned that safety always came with a price, and at least Brent's price didn't include bruises. But I couldn't say any of that out loud. You're under my protection, Brent continued, his voice gentling. Under my care. Yes, that means I know where you are. Yes, that means I control certain aspects of your life. But it also means you sleep through the night. Means you don't jump at loud noises. Means you can walk down the street without constantly looking over your shoulder. It means I'm owned. It means you're mine. He didn't flinch from the words. And I take care of what's mine. The honesty of it stole my breath. No pretty lies.
No euphemisms.
Just the brutal truth laid bare between us. I was his. Completely. Whether I'd chosen it or not. I should hate you, I whispered. Perhaps. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. The same gesture from weeks ago, gentle and devastating. But you don't. He was right. God help me, he was right. I didn't hate him. I hated what he represented. Hated the loss of autonomy, the surveillance, the control. But him? The man who defended me, protected me, made me feel safe for the first time in years? Him I couldn't hate. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. Come back to work tomorrow, he said quietly. Bellissimo isn't the same without you. It wasn't a request. Wasn't quite an order. Just a statement of fact, delivered with the expectation of compliance. I nodded, and something in his expression softened. Good. He moved toward the door, then paused. Marjorie. Yes, you are free. Within the boundaries I've set, within the protection I provide, you're free to be yourself. To make choices. To live without fear. His eyes met mine. That's more freedom than you've had in years. Even if it doesn't feel like it yet. He left before I could respond, the door clicking shut behind him with a finality that felt like punctuation. I stood alone in my apartment, staring at the space he'd occupied, trying to process the conversation. Free within boundaries. Choices within control. It was an oxymoron. A contradiction. And yet, as I lay in bed that night, I realized something. I did sleep better. I didn't jump at sounds. I had stopped constantly watching for Stan. The cage was beautiful. The bars were invisible. And the man who held the key genuinely believed he was setting me free. Maybe he was. Or maybe I'd just learned to love my chains. I returned to Bellissimo the next evening. The staff welcomed me back with careful smiles and tactful silence about the incident. No one mentioned Stan. No one asked questions. They just folded me back into the rhythm of service, like I'd never left. Carmen pulled me aside during the pre-shift meeting. You okay? I don't know, I admitted. She studied my face for a long moment. But you're staying. It wasn't a question. Yes. She nodded, something like understanding in her eyes. Then stay smart. Stay aware. And remember, you always have a choice. Even when it doesn't feel like it. But did I? 3 weeks later, long after closing, I stood alone in Bellissimo's dining room. The staff had gone home. The kitchen was dark. Only a few candles remained lit, casting golden light across the empty tables. Brent sat at his usual table near the window, a glass of wine untouched before him, watching me with that quiet intensity that had become as familiar as breathing. I moved through the silent restaurant, my footsteps muffled by carpet, and approached his table. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. The question was in his eyes. Are you staying? I picked up the wine bottle from the bar, a vintage I'd learned to recognize, one of his favorites, and brought it to his table. My hands were steady as I poured.
No trembling. No hesitation.
The candlelight caught on my name tag, Marjorie, the gold letters gleaming like a brand. I set down the bottle and met his eyes. Thank you, he said softly.
Not for the wine.
For something deeper.
For the choice I'd made by staying.
By pouring. By accepting this beautiful cage with its invisible bars. I smiled. It felt almost peaceful. Almost. Because beneath the smile, beneath the steady hands and the acceptance, a part of me still remembered what freedom used to feel like. Before Stan taught me that love came with fists. Before Brent taught me that protection came with possession. Before I learned that sometimes the prettiest cages are the hardest to escape. Not because they lock from the outside, but because after a while, you forget that you wanted to leave. Brent raised his glass to me. A silent toast to the choice I'd made, the price I'd paid, the sanctuary I'd found. I smiled back, my reflection captured in the dark window behind him. And in that reflection, I saw the truth my smile tried to hide. I'd left one man who controlled me through fear, and walked straight into the arms of another who controlled me through care. Different methods, different walls, different chains. But a cage is still a cage. Even when it's gilded. Even when the door is unlocked. Even when you're too comfortable to walk through it. I turned away from Brent's table and walked through the empty restaurant toward the exit, my shift finally over. The black sedan waited outside, as always. But tonight, for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt resigned. And maybe that was the most dangerous feeling of all. Was this a love story or a cautionary tale? Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment, and your perspective matters. If this story moved you, please share it. Don't forget to click the subscribe button.